words to Timothy were not just about challenging Timothy to be closer to Jesus and to encourage him and amp up his confidence, and here you go, script check, right? And to just really help him kind of grow and flourish. But Paul was also giving some very specific instructions to Timothy on how church should work in order to be this pillar. We're going to look at that here in a second. I think it's chapter 3, verse 14. And I don't have it on the slide because I was just going to read it to you, but some of you are eager to get in there, so go ahead and look that up. But Paul's saying to Timothy, if we really want to strengthen the church, there are some things that have to happen. Because what happens when a church is strengthened? What makes a church more stable? What helps a church grow? What allows a church to really become what it needs to be to spread the gospel more effectively? What does it take in your thought, in your mind, to strengthen a church? That's an open question, so y'all can respond as you're thinking through love.
Always a good answer.
Second only to Jesus.
Jesus, yeah. But I think Jesus, yes.
Having all of the individual parts in relationship with God and not relying on other people's relationships.
So all the parts relying on God, not on each other. Okay, good. Good, what else?
Reaching out to people.
You bet. Spread the gospel. That's the undercurrent of everything that we've looked at so far in Timothy and will continue to be. I mean, without spreading, then it's kind of a moot point, isn't it? The church would die and would be no longer if it just faded off with the old generation. Well, I'm going to throw something out there because I think all of that stuff is very, very true. To grow, we've all got to be involved. We've all got to be depending on Jesus. We all have to be looking at what God's given us to share with others, whether it's a treasure, a talent, or time, whatever it is. All of those things are important, that we're all relying on one another, and at the same time should be focused in on Jesus for sure. Today, specifically, we're going to look at what a lot of Timothy is about. It's about leadership. And leadership is one of those things that we either love or we hate, right? I happen to love leadership. A lot of you, when the word comes up, leadership, you're like, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I get it. I just have been studying leadership ever since I left my other job and started to get involved in ministry, because I think, like John Maxwell says, everything falls or rises on leadership. Anything that you look at rises or falls on the ability to lead well and to have good leaders in place. If you don't have good leaders in place, it's going to fall apart. And so I'm a big John Maxwell fan, and he has said this, and a lot of people have echoed it throughout the years, and so I pulled it out because I was like, oh, maybe this is a good place to start. So leadership is either something that you love or something that you hate. And so if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I need you to lead something, what may be some of the excuses that you make about not jumping into a leadership position?
Too busy.
Too busy, absolutely. I mean, that has been pretty much an excuse that we've used every week in this series, hasn't it been? Too busy to agonize over my spiritual walk, too busy to pray, which says a lot about our lives today, doesn't it? If we're too busy for these things, and these are the eternal things, maybe we need to reprioritize what else we're involved in. What are some other reasons not to be involved, or excuses that we make about leadership? Unqualified, absolutely. It's uncomfortable to lead, sure.
And fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Fear, all of those things. What if I fail and everybody watches? Well, you're gonna. And that's part of leadership, right? I mean, if you want to be liked by everyone, go sell ice cream. That's just part of how this goes. And some people are lactose intolerant, so that might even be a struggle, right?
You have to give it away first.
Yeah, give it away. Good. What else? Did you say something?
Said it has to be lactose free.
Oh, lactose-free ice cream for everybody. That's kind of gross, like gluten-free bread, right? Nobody loves gluten-free bread. I mean, you have to eat gluten-free bread if you're... Anyway. Okay, so some of the things that I wrote down here that might be possible excuses. I'm not a leader. I don't have time. I don't know where to start. Other people can do it.
I'm a woman, maybe.
Say that again?
I'm a woman, maybe that could be a reason why we don't.
You're maybe, no, you are a woman. And that's absolutely, I love that. We're going to talk about that too, believe it or not. I think other people can do it as a pretty easy one. Well, somebody else will do it. Somebody else will do it. You know, having 4 kids, when you said somebody needs to feed the dogs, guess what? Dogs starved to death. Because everybody's like, well, somebody else can do it. And the next thing you know, you've got dead dogs. That's not true. We didn't let them. Somebody did that one. Somebody else can do it better. I'm not qualified. You guys hit that one. You don't need me. Well, here's the thing. Like, if we're going to truly strengthen the church and everything depends on having good leaders in place, then we need to seriously consider, how does this apply to me? How does this particular section apply to me? And so I love what Paul's going to tell us here in a second. But that the verse that I asked you to turn to, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 14 says that Paul is laying out the reason that he's writing this letter to Timothy. He's like, I'd like to come to you. I might not make it in time, but I'm writing so that you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household. I love that he calls it household there because, you know, we're house church. That kind of fits nicely into our strategy here, right? By the way, God's household is the church of the living God. He's not dead. He is alive and active in what we do. And that's the songs that we sang and what Trish kind of emphasized is, I mean, if we're not encountering him as an alive God, we're missing out. But it's the pillar and the foundation of the truth. So the gospel, the good news of Jesus, his death, his burial, his resurrection, he's alive today, matters because it's the pillar, it's the central purpose, and it spreads through God's household, God's church, into all of the community and the world from there. And so we better know how to conduct ourselves in this important institution, right? So we're going to jump ahead, or backwards actually a little bit. Go back to 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1. So just, you might not even have to turn any place. And we're going to take a look at, he's specifically telling Timothy now what kind of leadership we need in place in our churches. All right, so he says, here's a trustworthy saying. There's 5 times he says that in this book. Here's a trustworthy saying worthy of full acceptance. Here's a trustworthy saying. Here's a trustworthy saying. Because he's laying down these pillars in how the church should operate and how we should consider it and think about God. These trustworthy sayings are worthwhile knowing because it really helps us encounter God and think about God in a way that Paul says is absolutely worthwhile. Right? So here's a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. What does aspires mean? Yeah, desiring, living up to, taking specific steps towards a goal or a desire to reach for, to set one's heart on. Have you ever heard that before in church? Like, aspire to leadership. Aspire. Paul's saying, this is a trustworthy saying. You should be aspiring to leadership. Because whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. It's important. Like, of all places that you could lead, leading in God's household is one of the best places to start. And it's a noble task. Now remember, Paul is writing during a time where people were being persecuted. And so being an overseer at that time, it kind of sets you up for persecution pretty dramatically. Like, if you want to take out an organization and everything rises and falls on leadership, take out the leader, right? And once you take out the leader, then watch what happens. If you don't believe me, take a look at what happens to a fantastic world-class football team when their quarterback and head coach leave. It takes time to rebuild that because everything rises and falls on leadership. And to grow that leadership level back up, it takes time. So he's saying, man, if you're aspiring to this, you're aspiring for a noble task. And most people are like, why in the world would I want to take on this role of overseer if it's going to put me at the forefront of criticism, persecution, difficulty, hardship? Well, hopefully we'll see why in a minute. So what's an overseer?
Who watches it probably happening in the show,
Absolutely. So in the New Testament and in churches today, like there are certain roles that are kind of elevated above other roles. And the overseer role is what the translation uses to kind of define this role. But you might see this word come, this official title come in many different ways. It might be elder, it might be board member, it might be bishop or presbyter. If you're in the Presbyterian church, like that makes a little bit more sense. Different like bishops, we don't have bishops in our church, unless you're playing chess. But what all of those are kind of the people that are designed to be leading and directing and managing the nature of the church. So anytime you see this word overseer, you can substitute that with any of those other words like elder or something, okay? So now the overseer, it says in verse 2, is to be above reproach. In each one of these lists of different things that he's saying, you need to kind of be careful that you're operating within a certain behavioral subset. We're not just going to let anybody be an overseer, or in a minute we'll see deacon, okay? We're not going to let anybody just willy-nilly their way into this. No, these people have to be held to a higher standard because this office is a higher standard of office than just normal general churchgoer. But yet, it's a noble task, and we should all be aspiring to those types of roles. He says, the overseer is to be above reproach. Everything on this list helps reinforce that above reproach phrase. What does it mean to be above reproach? That people can't find fault with you in these areas. Like, you are living a life that's moral, that's ethical, that's generous and kind. All of these things that help other people see you as somebody that isn't taking advantage of anyone or unkind or things like that. So he goes on to say, if you're going to be above reproach, you should be faithful to your wife. You should be temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach. If you're looking on how Paul is recommending to Timothy to set up churches, it might be one of the things that you should underline, able to teach. Okay, and we're going to see why here in just a second, okay? Not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. What not given to drunkenness? What does that mean? Well, drunkenness leads to recklessness. And when you're reckless, you're not above reproach, right? He's not saying, in fact, later on he encourages Timothy to have a glass of wine. He's not saying that we have to prohibit alcohol usage. But what he is saying is you have to be extremely cautious with alcohol. Because before you know it, it can take you down a pathway, even a one-time experience, where you are not as self-controlled, you are not as diligent, you are not as capable of seeing things as they are, and you can make some big mistakes if you're not careful. Not to mention that being controlled by alcohol is a totally different thing. It can lead to all kinds of despair and brokenheartedness and control issues in your life. You should be cautious, extremely cautious. He's saying not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. We talked a little bit about that last week. I think that is a common theme throughout Timothy. He says in verse 4, he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. Now, above reproach and worthy of full respect are phrases that are going to come back again and again. So keep your eye on those phrases, okay? But I love verse 5 because he says, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church, which is a family? It starts at home, folks. Like, all of this stuff starts at home. Let's keep going. Verse 6. He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. Wow, what does that mean? I mean, when you're early on in your faith journey, like you haven't had enough experiences, you don't have enough depth in your biblical understanding, that it would be really easy for you to be susceptible to pride or temptation. I've seen this over and over again. you know, and honestly, like part of it is the church's own fault, especially pastors, because most of the time pastors feel like they're overworked and there's not enough people to get involved in stuff. So somebody comes along and you're like, yes, great, you can lead this, and you drop them into place, and then the next thing you know, they're like a mess because they weren't ready for it. And that's not fair for anybody. It's not fair for the person, it's not fair for the church, the people that they're leading, like all of those things. You have to be very, very diligent about who we're putting into place. Doesn't mean that we don't love people that are new in their faith, that are growing their faith, absolutely. But it also means that there may be some steps, some sequentialness in how we actually put people into this particular role of overseer or elder, okay? Let's keep going. So it shouldn't be a recent convert, or they may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as them. Verse 7, he also must have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. What is one of the number one things that our enemy would like to do with our reputations in the community? Absolutely destroy them. Because if you're not trustworthy, if you're not reputable, the outside world's going to look into the church and be like, they're just a bunch of goofballs in there. I don't want to have anything to do with that. They're hypocritical. They're all of these things. So our reputation to outsiders has to be strong. Verse 8, in the same way, he says deacons are to be worthy of respect. Well, what's a deacon?
Somebody who serves.
No. The word deacon actually means servant. Okay? Not there's another class of people in our churches, they're just the meaningless floor sweepers. No, that's not what that means at all. It means any church position is a servant leadership position. But the deacon specifically kind of came out of Acts 6, I think, when the elders, the apostles were trying to do what they were supposed to be doing. There's just so much stuff going on. They couldn't do it all, so they said, let's appoint some people to help with these other things that will maintain the day-to-day type of operational parts of what we're doing here so that we can keep focused on what we really need to be focused on. So the word deacon came along because it's these servants, these people that are willing to put other people before themselves because of the gospel and do whatever is necessary to make things happen. Deacon means servant leader. All right? That's what it means. I lost my place. So in the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect. Sincere, not indulging in much wine, not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested. And then if there's nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. So he's laying out kind of this program of what church leadership should be. So you've got the deacons, and then you've got the overseers, right? The deacons is kind of open to people. They don't have to have all of the same qualifications as the elders or overseers do, but they need to have some. They still need to be worthy of respect. They still need to understand the truths of the gospel. We're going to talk more about that here in just a minute. But it's kind of a progression, okay? So in verse 11, it says, in the same way, the women are to be, guess what? Worthy. I told you guys that was going to come up over and over again. Like I gave you that answer before I asked the question. Okay? In the same way, women are to be worthy of respect. Not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. Wait, what? Women? Surely he means like the wives of the deacons, because we're talking about deacons here right now. You think that's what that means? I don't know. I mean, I think there can be arguments for a lot of different things. Here's what I know. The word women in this particular verse is a generic word for women. Some of the translations out there might say the wives of deacons, but the correct translation is women. So is he talking about the wives of deacons? The women that assist their husbands in the work of being deacons in the church? Or is he saying women deacons? I think you should come back next week and hear what I think about that. So, next week is our big women week. That didn't come out right. Little women are welcome too. I mean, all women of all whatever are welcome here, okay? I feel like I'm talking talking myself into a hole in a hurry here. We're going to, next week, we're going to take a look at all of the things that Paul said about women in 1 Timothy. Because there's some pretty confusing things. A few weeks ago, I told you not to read ahead, and some of you did anyway. And you're like, look at what he's saying about these women, right? And it can completely break some modern thought patterns right down, and it can quickly put women into a category that, like Trish said, maybe if you're a woman, you're not allowed to lead. Women should remain silent. I don't allow women to speak or teach. I mean, those are some of the things Paul said to Timothy. What in the world was going on? We're going to talk about those things next week. Okay? Anyway, just show up, because I think it's going to be good. I'm excited about it. I prepared that message this past week, and I think it's going to be a really good conversation. But I also believe that this word here is not speaking to the wives of deacons. I think he's speaking to women leaders in the church. All right? Because he goes back to the same thought process in verse 12. A deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household well. And those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Jesus Christ. Okay. I know this is more of kind of an educational conversation or information. It's not quite what we normally try to do on Sunday mornings here, but I think it's really important, as we're all part of a church together, that we all have the same perspective on what it is going to take to strengthen the church. And there's two things, I think, that we need to get a little bit more aware of, maybe three things that we need to get a little bit more aware of as we attend house church and as we look towards our future. Because strengthening the church requires leadership. And leadership is something that should be aspired to. It's a noble process. It's a noble thought. It's a noble thing to get involved in leadership. And some of you are like, I don't want to, but I want to just remind you that all serving is leading. And I've seen some incredible things happening in the background around here. Like, just because you're not sitting in this seat in front of all of these people sharing this stuff doesn't mean that you're not a leader. Yeah. Picking up pine needles is as much about servant leadership as anything else that goes on around here. We are all part of the body of Christ. We all have a part to play. So I don't want you to be intimidated by this word leadership, because you don't need to be. It's not like if you aren't qualified, we're not going to allow you to start doing some things. It's not like you have to have a seminary degree to be no, that's not at all. Did you notice that not at one point in all of those qualifications that he gave is education on the list? Otherwise, Jesus himself might not have qualified. Right? I mean, maturity is. Maturity is definitely on the list. Let's take a look at what he's saying. So if we're going to strengthen the church, how do we do that? What does it take to strengthen the church? Well, he gives us two offices that we should be using in churches. And I got to tell you guys, when I started here at Springs Ranch before House Church, I was really opposed to these titles and this kind of way that Paul's telling Timothy how to do it. I didn't like it. Somebody even sat down with me and said, why don't we have deacons? And I was like, because deacon just means servant. We've got a lot of people serving here. We don't need deacons. And what I've learned over the years is that I'm also capable of making some pretty big mistakes. And I think deacons would be really good for our church to have. I also think elders would be really good for our church to have. When we created the first constitution for Springs Ranch, a leadership team was put in place. And what is a leadership team? Well, I mean, kind of, right? Like, why do we have to call it something different just because it seems hip and cool? And at the time, everybody was calling their leadership teams instead of elders, okay? So, all of that to say, man, I think this is something that we need to consider as we move into the future. I mean, some of the things that we need to do as we move forward is take a look at what we used to do at Springs Ranch Church and bring it into House Church, because we haven't changed any of that stuff. So, the offices that Timothy is being told to kind of get involved here, one of them is elders. And elders is different than deacons. It's a more senior kind of thing. Elders are mature people. People that haven't just just come to faith, people that have had time to kind of be deacons and have had time to serve the church and have time to develop their faith and mature in it. People that understand what spiritual wisdom is and have it. People that have a call to be elders. Because Paul says, those of you that aspire to the role of overseer desire a noble task. Like, part of that aspiring is, this is one of those roles that should be respected enough that not everybody is just like, yes, I want to do that. It should be a little bit of, God's telling me I need to do this. It should be a little daunting. And we're going to see why here in just a second, okay? But what do elders do? It's a little different than what the deacons do. Elders are really responsible for managing the affairs of the church, like the financial resources, making sure that they're put in place and doing the right things, making sure that there's stewardship and accountability happening, making sure that the direction that we're going is on track, also helping determine that direction with the work of the pastor, who's typically an elder, and guiding and managing and leading the church. But the other qualification for elders that's unique is that underlined word. Elders should be teachers. And every place you look in the New Testament, those two things are kind of combined. Elders, overseers, bishops, whatever we're calling them, they need to be able to teach. It doesn't mean that they all will every week. It just means that they need to have the ability to sit up here like I do from a week-to-week kind of thing and deliver God's word to people. That's one of the roles of being an elder. Now there's two different types of elders that we can kind of pull apart, and one is shepherding and the other is teaching. The shepherding elder is more of the manage and direction kind of group, and the teaching elders can be more of like the teaching pastors types of group. You have some overlap, just depending on who God brings to any specific church, but typically, here's the problem that we run into, is you usually have a gifting for one or the other. Usually managing, leadership, that kind of thing is your gifting, or teaching is your gifting. It's rare to find somebody that has both in such a skill set that they can do all of it well. And I think part of what we see when senior pastors of large churches burn out or fail morally, it's because we're asking them to do too much. That wasn't God's ordained way. Even Moses, one of the greatest leaders of all time, his father-in-law comes up to him and says, dude, why are you doing all of this? Spread it out. Spread it out. So I think over the next year or so, we need to be looking at what types of leaders or elders or overseers do we need to be involving here, and how do we get them to that place? The last thing I think that it's important to note, and we didn't cover this, but in chapter 5, verse 17, Paul also tells Timothy, there's a couple of things that you've got to watch out for in this elder role. One is, since you are leading, again, you got a big target on your back or your front, depending on what's coming up against you. You got all the people behind you and the people in front of you. And it's really important that we protect these elders, because they will be people that are gossiped about, that are criticized more than anything, that are putting themselves in harm's way oftentimes, that it's really easy to see something and complain about it. And he says, make sure that if there are any complaints that are lodged against elders, that at least 2 people are coming to you before you listen to this complaint. So let's protect them. Let's protect their honor. Let's protect their reputation. Let's really make sure that any gossip or malicious talk or criticism, deserve it or not, that comes against them, let's make sure that we take it seriously, but also address it correctly. Let's protect them so that we don't kill a bunch of people in this role. But also, he says in that section, and if they are wrong, you rebuke them publicly. So the accountability is heightened for them too. You bring them up in front of the group of people that they're over, and you say, here's what you've done wrong, here's how you're restoring this, and here's how you move forward. And everybody's aware of what's happened, because that person has had a public role. He says once you start doing that, then the rest of the church begins to see. Sin is serious. Sin is serious. And it creates a gap and an obstacle for your connection to God. And so we're going to hold our leaders to a higher accountability also. Okay, the last role that he kind of put in this was deacons. So how do the deacons fit? Well, the deacons are under the direction and authority of the elders. They are there to assist the whole church by doing some of the practical things that the elders may not have time to focus on. If the elders are looking at the big picture, then the little picture gets overlooked, and it doesn't get done well, and people aren't served well. If we're not serving people well, guess what? They're not going to stick around. If we're not caring for people like they need to be cared for, if we're not listening to people like they need to be listened for, if we're not preparing for people like we need to prepare for them, like if we're not doing all of these things, then that would be part of what deacons would be responsible for doing. Man, do you think that God's going to keep bringing people to our family? If we can't care for them, why would He? Why would He? So the deacons assist the elders. They're under their direction and authority. They provide support for practical tasks and services. The things that need to be done, but don't often get done, the deacons are part of that, okay? But they still have this requirement of maturity. Why? Because sometimes serving can be really hard. People are ungrateful. They don't take notice of. There's not a lot of appreciation sometimes, so you've got to be deep in your faith to be a deacon. It's not easy. It requires depth and maturity, because still, the idea is how we're presenting God's Word and God's church to the community around us is a big part of that. So we don't want jerky deacons. We don't mind deacons that eat jerky, but we don't want jerky deacons, okay? We just don't. So, how do we wrap this all up? Because it seems like just a lot of information, doesn't it? And sometimes we look at these types of things and go, okay, we got a long way to go. And I know, and it's okay. We got a long way to go. We'll get there, and we just trust God and do the next right thing, right? But I do think that we need to take these instructions seriously and start orienting ourselves to them. So how do we do that? Well, we've got to remember that all serving is leading. All serving is leading. All serving is leading. So I told you at the beginning, like, everything rises and falls on leadership. And leadership is one of those words that either we're like, yes, let's do this, or we're like, I don't even want to talk to you about leadership. I don't like it. It scares me. I don't want to be one. Like the list goes on and on. But I'm telling you, all serving is leading. So let's just serve one another well. Let's serve this body of Christ well. Let's serve this incredible resource that God has given us well. Let's be good stewards of the things that He's entrusted us with, right? Because here's how this works. If all serving is leading, then starting with the small things and serving in small ways is going to grow your leadership. And we should all aspire to leadership because it's a noble task. So let's all just start doing little things that help make this a better place. Behind the scenes menial tasks make a huge difference. These are the types of things that they don't teach in seminary, right? How to take out the trash, how to unplug a sink, how to wash someone's feet. I mean, that's what those things are. How to be kind to one another, how to greet somebody at the door, how to call them during the week and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, but I've been thinking about you, what's going on? Like, all those kinds of things. That's the training ground. The little things are the training ground. You can't be faithful with much until you're faithful with little. So you start serving now. You don't wait for someday. When my kids are grown, when they're in school, when I have more money, when I got this different job, once I've finished getting this degree. No, service starts now. Don't wait. Don't wait. So, all serving is leading, and we should all aspire to leadership. Why is that? Why is that important? Let me go back here for a second, because verse 13 says, those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. See, by aspiring to leadership, what we're saying is we're willing to grow. We're willing to grow. And I'll tell you, a lot of you study your Bibles, a lot of you pray. But there's something different about serving people that will grow your faith in a way that those other two things might not. Serving other people opens the opportunity for you to really encounter God in the midst of what He's doing. So does opening your Bible, don't get me wrong, but serving other people is kind of where the whole thing comes together. And it's an amazing experience, and it will grow your faith. But it also grows the kingdom of God. It also strengthens the body of believers. It also does all of these things. And I'm not talking about some kind of heroic effort on your part. I'm talking about all serving is leading. One of the most interesting times in ministry that I had with Trish is we were at Chapel Hills, and there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of pressure on us, and the things that we were involved in just seemed to be batted down by people in leadership positions. It just wasn't working. One particular Sunday, we were both very, very frustrated. Like, very frustrated. And that's a dangerous place to be when you're on a church staff, because you've got to respect and operate under the authority of the leaders that God put in place over you. You have to. If you can't do that, you need to leave. Okay? And so we were both kind of in this bent, twisted space, and it just happened to be a day that they were doing like some kind of carnival thing afterwards. And Trish and I both wound up at the snow cone machine, making snow cones for people. And it softened our hearts. It changed us because serving other people, like it put everything back in perspective. Oh yeah, all of these people and kids that were coming to get snow cones, all of these adults that had to have the rainbow, all of these people coming up to us that we're doing the snow cones for reminded us, man, we love them, and that's why we love them. You see, we all aspire to leadership, and we should be working on it, but I want to remind you that it's in those simple, serving kinds of things that God can show up and do miraculous stuff. Now, the other thing that I want to share about this aspire to leadership thought is hard. Because immature people don't want to help. Immature people don't want to help. They just don't want to. They don't want to grow. They don't want to do anything different. Anybody that's had any young kids in their house or middle-aged kind of kids knows this. You're like, do the dishes? No. Well, come on. You're like, somebody's got to do the dishes. Well, I don't want to do the dishes. Well, you've got to do the dishes or you've got to move out. I'll tell you, parents or soon-to-be parents or someday parents, the best slogan that we've ever used in our house is you'll be looking in a window you used to look out of. Changes behavior in a hurry. Now here's the thing, you got to back it up. You got to back it up. And every one of our children can tell a time when they were on the outside of that house looking in and the door was locked and they're like, what do I do? I'll do the dishes. Changes their behavior in a hurry. I want to use that. Yep, use it. I'm telling you, free advice. Free advice. But immature people don't want to help. They want to point out all the problems, but they don't want to be the solution. Mature people see problems, find solutions, and act on them. Mature people see need, find resources to meet the need. Mature people love people no matter what. See the difference? So we should aspire to these roles because it helps grow us. And it will help grow people around you, I promise you. And it builds the church. We can't just be comfortable sitting on our and waiting for somebody else to do it. Can't. Okay, last thing. Character matters. And every one of these things you saw, this list, did not contain all of these hoops that you had to jump through. You had to be, a Bible scholar to be a leader in church. No, it didn't say those things. What it said was your character, your character, your character. Every one of those is character traits. Like your character matters when you need to be above reproach and worthy of respect because the world is watching, right? And I got to remind you, character is built in those difficult places. Behind the scenes, no one's looking, tasks seem small and insignificant, maybe even meaningless. But that's where character is built. A lot of us want to jump ahead. And I'll tell you, I heard this from somebody, like, everything in life, when you get old enough and you look back, like everything in life took longer than you thought it would. Everything in life took longer than I thought it would. And a lot of you young people are looking, like trying to jump ahead, like be there, and once I'm there with you, I'm telling you now, once you're there, you're gonna find out there are still things that aren't perfect. There are still things that need improvement. There are still things that you wish were different. It's part of the journey of this, right? Like, it's gonna take longer than you think and that you hope. That everything that is happening today is capable of building your character and building your faith and building your opportunity and willingness and attitude and just letting go of yourself and seeing that serving is leading and that giving is amazing and how it reflects God through us. Giving of yourself, giving of your time, your talents, also your treasure, like all of those things. And you start now because when you're doing it with little, God says, oh, you're faithful with little. So I can trust you to be faithful with much, see? Start with little, and he builds more in. But it all starts with character. So let's wrap this up. To be a healthy and stable church, to be a healthy church, to be a stable church, to be a church that's growing, like we need servant leaders. Otherwise, you just keep getting what you get when you do what you've done. So I'm just going to drop that off. Like, are you aspiring to leadership? Are you willing to serve other people? Are you willing to roll up your sleeves and get involved? Because we need servant leaders. And spiritual growth should lead to serving others. If change isn't happening in the people that are attending, if God's not working in and through you and challenging you to be different, then I'm not doing something right or your heart is hard. Because spiritual growth, if we're trying to grow closer to Jesus and know him more, like he served with his life. So, spiritual growth should lead to serving others. And if it's not, then we're doing something wrong. Because more than anything, what's going to change this world is a few fishermen, a couple taxmen, some women that were willing to show up early to the tomb on a Sunday morning. They're willing to roll up their sleeves and get involved and give of themselves to the mission and leave what they need to leave behind and follow Jesus, because the church needs people that are willing to risk serving and leading for God. That's what's going to make a difference in our culture and in our lives. We need people willing to roll up their sleeves, see a need, meet it, see a problem, fix it, see a person and love them. Like, that is the church. And that is leading. So yeah, we need deacons and we need elders and we need to rewrite our Constitution because it's full of weird things in there, like leadership team and who knows what else. But that was a different time. Let's aspire to being the best that we can be because Jesus is worth it.